from Chris and Ralph Productions. Chris, thank you. Thank you for having me. I hope you're having a wonderful night and welcome to Chris and Ralph Productions. Oh man, a lovely crowd. Very beautiful crowd. You ready for a nice time tonight, guys? I'm ready to have a great show. As always, we have our main course of topic, and that is I'm gonna go ahead and stop it. I'm trying to be the host of the Night Owls, like Jack Delroy. But I'm not as charming as David Dastmalchian, but who is? All right, guys. So as always, I am Chris of Chris and Ruff Productions. Hope you're having a wonderful evening. So tonight I'm going to be talking about. I'm gonna go ahead and say it at the beginning of this review. My favorite movie of the year, and that is Late Night with the Devil.
Anymore. No one's going anywhere.
How could you let it happen, Jack? How could you let it happen?
Please be warned, anyone with young children in the room.
Late Night with the Devil is a film starring David Dastmalchian, co-starring a very unique cast. The premise of the story is that it is a lost found footage film about a late talk show host and his episode that he did back in the 70s where he was going to be speaking with the devil. So, like I mentioned, David Dastmalchian, he is a friend of the channel. He's liked and commented on a couple of my posts on Instagram. So I like to assume he's a friend of the channel. David, if you're watching this, you're amazing. So the premise of this, it's sort of kind of like 1970s mixed with Satan rituals, mixed with The Conjuring, mixed with Insidious, mixed with Johnny Carson. You start off in this film sort of like with a timeline of when it takes place and the career of Jack Delroy, who was played by David. You're introduced to an array of characters such as his wife, who is Madeline Delroy, played by Georgina Haig, and it's basically their relationship and how he went on to become this small-time late-night talk show host to up there fighting with Johnny Carson for ratings. I think what this movie does and accomplishes really, really uniquely is that it captures that 1970s feel of a late night show, as well as, people are smoking on set. People are not on their phones because they're living in the moment. Phones don't exist, I understand. And I think what this movie does is the whole movie, after the first 5 minutes, when it gives you an introduction of who Jack Delroy is, this whole movie is basically just an episode of Jimmy Fallon. It's an episode of Johnny Carson. You're you're the only time you really take a break from the actual show is whenever there are cuts for breaks, for commercial breaks, and you see the chaos that's happening backstage and how an event leading to another sort of like snowballs and ends up leading up to our climax. I was talking to my sister about this film. She had a chance, she saw it as well. And we were talking about it, and she was basically saying like she doesn't really know how to break this film down. There was a beginning and there was an end, but what was the middle? What was the chunk of our film? What I like to think is that the chunk of our film is the interview or trying to channel, having a conversation with the devil, with a spirit, a demon, and how all that just sort of hits the fan. When you're trying to speak with entities that are from, another dimension, another world, this another just sort of spiritual realm, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't really work out in your favor. And that's what the cast started to find out. So our main, I don't even know, she is this character an antagonist, a protagonist? Lily DeBow, played by Ingrid Torelli. She is a young actress. I don't think I've ever seen anything of hers, but she was phenomenal as Lily. She played this very distraught character who has gone through so much turmoil. She is the channel to the devil, and I'll go on to get more into details in that. Of course, Jack Delroy. We also have June Ross Mitchell, played by Laura Gordon. June Ross, she's kind of like the caretaker and the guardian of Lily. Lily was actually found from a devil ritual, and that's why she's the channel to the underworld. We have a skeptic, this guy who is the president of the University of Yapster. He's yapping the whole time, which I like this character a lot. but he's just a giant skeptic. That character is Carmichael Haig, played by Ian Bliss. Carmichael Haig, I think he is the true antagonist of this film. And that's saying something because the literal devil is in this film, and Carmichael is the worst character in this film. Not saying like he's a bad character, like the way he was portrayed, or like, no, I'm just saying what the character does and how he just keeps yapping throughout the whole film and just being a skeptic of everything that's going on. He is the true, to me, the true, actually, now that I said that, he is the second true antagonist of this film, first being Jack Delroy. We also have Christo, played by Fasali Bazi. He is sort of like an act that comes onto the show to sort of just, who knows whether he's playing a bit or he's in on the bit. That's pretty much. And of course, we have Jack Delroy's co host, Gus McConnell, played by Rias Aturi. What the things that I love about this film, like I mentioned, it's my favorite film of the year. I am a sucker for mid-century sort of like nostalgia, so that definitely played a part into me being immersed in this film, as well as the story and the acting, of course. What I like about Jack Del as a character is he puts on this facade of a very caring and giving person who has put sort of like his guests before him. He's put his co-host before him. He's sort of put on this facade of being uplifting in a way. But when the film starts to carry on, I think an undertone of this film is greed and lust and the wanting for power. That is the true mechanism of just, monsterism in this film. Monsterism. I don't know if that's a word. I think I just made that up. He is just a very selfish character. And when you're watching, you're like, how? He's being so kind to people. He's being kind to Lily, who is a channel to Satan. He's very touchy feely with June Ross, and she's vice versa with him. He's kind to Carmichael, even though he doesn't deserve it. Christo, his co-host Gus. Um, so it's interesting. Like, why am I saying like he's not a good person? Well, you start to understand why he's successful. Um, what made him the man that he is, whether he's as successful as Johnny Carson or not. He's chasing this dragon. He's chasing the ratings, and he'll do anything at any cost to be number one. And that includes, hurting those that he loves the most. Um, the ending. I'm not gonna go into any spoilers of the ending, even though I'm kind of going into a little spoilers. It's very much a sort of play. You go through the stages of Jack Delroy and you start to see the other side of the coin of who he really is. And it's very interesting. Some of the other things that I really, really enjoy about this film are the practical effects. This movie uses a lot of practical effects. Is there CG? Believe there are moments, but I don't think so at any point of most of the havoc that happens. There are certain things that happen to characters where that is literal practical effects, and at times it's paying homage to the practical effects of the 70s and the 80s where someone's face would explode and it's obviously a puppet because you're not going to actually explode someone's head. And I think that's what this movie also accomplishes is just taking you and immersing you into the world of horror, into the world of sort of like uncomfortableness where you feel uncomfortable because you're watching a sort of like an exorcism in front of you, and you feel like you're part of the audience. You, the viewer, you're part of the audience that's within the movie. Nothing you can do except for watch. You can't intervene, you can't speak up. You got to just watch and unfold and see how people's greediness and lust for power is just hurting others. Speaking of hurting others, we have Jack Delroy's wife, Madeline Delroy, and she is a key member, a key component of this story. I don't want to say what she plays in it or how she affects Jack, but definitely it is mentioned at the beginning of this film of her being intertwined in his career and what actually happened to her. Um, so I think if you're wondering like What does this film accomplish? A couple of things. I think first, the acting of David Dastmalchian I think is wonderful, and he's a very, very true lead who can uplift everybody around him as an actor and bring the best out of people because of the performance that he brings out of himself. Two, I think the horror elements, is it, sort of like The Conjuring or sort of like Exodus, where it's just like this massive gore fest? And those movies aren't really gore fest, not really. But I think what it does is the practical effects, like I mentioned, plays homage to the 70s and the 80s, and it definitely raises the bar of what horror can be today, because a lot of horror relies on CG. Understandable. I understand that. And there's a lot of horror movies out there that don't rely on CG. Like my favorite film of 20, did it come out 2023? Yeah. Evil Dead Rise. That's my favorite movie of last year. One of my favorite movies of last year. And that relied a lot on practical effects as well. So I think this movie really paying homage to that time, as well as just the story. You really can't predict what is going to happen. Is there a couple of things that if you really don't even focus on what's happening in that moment, and you try to think throughout the movie key points and like kind of nitpick and be like, okay, this ties to this. He mentioned this earlier, and she just mentioned this, so that ties in together. You can do that if you want, but that's not that's not very fun to watch, to feel, to watch a movie. You know what I mean? So I think this story is very intriguing, and you're on a roller coaster throughout. And overall, it's just a good movie. I think it is. It's a great movie, actually. Shudder, y'all did a phenomenal job in this film. David Dastmalchian, you did an amazing job. I think everybody here, everyone had their part, and everyone killed it. Everyone had their moment. And yeah, everyone had their moment. No character, it was introduced and kind of like put to the side. You don't really need to know anything going into this film. Just know that you're in for a ride. So if I'm gonna give this on a scale of 10, I'm giving it a 10. I actually love this film. So, guys, my question to you is, have you seen this film? If you're on the fence on watching it, I hope I've convinced you to watch it, because I think you have to see this in theaters. So, guys, that's pretty much all I have to say. Hopefully, I don't think I spoiled anything. I, sort of walked the line a little bit, but I didn't spoil anything at all. So if you're still watching, I do appreciate your support. So I'm gonna go ahead and get to it. Please like, share, and subscribe. It does help the channel, and we're growing slowly but surely. So as always, guys, I'm Chris. I'll catch y'all next time. Peace.